Welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to try to wrap our heads around bhava, which is this really important idea in Buddhist thought.
Right.
So we're looking at an excerpt from a book chapter, and get this, it's called Two Stories. Ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because the funny thing about bhava is that even though it's like key to understanding how to stop suffering, the Buddha himself never actually like came out and defined it.
Yeah, it's true.
So we're going to kind of play detective today, piece together this puzzle and see what we find. What do you think? You ready for this?
I'm ready. I think that's what makes this deep dive so interesting is like we're doing this detective work.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, using like all the context clues we can find in Buddhist teachings, you know.
Totally.
Related teachings, trying to figure out what this like super crucial concept is.
Okay, so let's start with what we do know.
Okay.
Bhava is usually translated as either like being or becoming. In your opinion, which translation do you think is like more accurate, more helpful here?
Becoming, definitely.
Becoming.
Because bhava, it's not about just like a fixed state of being.
Right.
It's more about this continuous, this kind of dynamic process of change, how things come to be, how they evolve. You know?
This process of becoming, is this like inherently connected to suffering?
That's a great point. Yeah.
Because, you know, in Buddhism, we always hear about how attachment like leads to suffering.
You're right to connect those ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, the text actually even highlights that bhava is linked to all those kind of, you know, negative mental states that keep us trapped in this cycle of suffering, right? Things like obsessions,
Blinking,
all those things.
So it's not just like bhava is part of the cycle of suffering. It sounds like it might actually be one of the main like drivers of that cycle.
You're exactly right. It's like to really see how this plays out, we've got to bring in this concept of dependent co-arising. So this is the Buddhist idea that everything is interconnected.
Okay, yeah.
Right, through cause and effect.
Yeah, like a domino effect.
Exactly, yeah.
One thing leads to the next. So where does bhava fit into this chain reaction?
So bhava it's a key link.
Okay.
Right? And the text actually explains this. It says it's driven by craving and clinging.
Okay.
Which then, you know, leads to all the like the heavy hitters, right?
Yeah.
Birth, aging, illness.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then ultimately death.
Right. So bhava is like this bridge between our like internal world, all those cravings and desires to like the external reality of suffering, right?
Right.
And impermanence. It's fascinating.
That's a great way to put it. It's like, yeah, our mental state actually creates our lived experience. It's crazy.
Wow.
And the text actually uses two like really fascinating stories to illustrate this connection. There are these like kind of cosmological tales from the Buddha's teachings. Interesting like stories, right? Like actual stories.
Yeah, like stories, like full-on narratives.
Okay, what can you tell us about them?
They're really powerful. Okay, so the first one, it's this myth about a creator god.
A creator god, okay.
Where these beings, they're reborn into this higher realm, a realm of like pure bliss.
Right.
And the first being to be reborn there, he completely forgets his past life.
Oh, wow.
And he becomes completely convinced that he created everything.
That is a serious case of cosmic ego, right? Like
totally.
Wow. But how does this story relate to bhava?
So it's all about how this being's sense of self, right, his bhava, it's totally shaped by delusion, right?
Yeah.
He's forgotten where he came from, and his entire perception of reality is like totally warped because of it.
So his bhava, because of his forgetting, caused him to like create his own reality, but it's a reality that's based on a total misunderstanding.
That is a fantastic summary.
Okay.
Really.
All right, so what about the second story? The one with the flavor earth.
Oh yeah, the flavor earth. That's a good one.
That sounds intriguing.
So imagine, right, these beings in this like primordial world.
Okay.
And they discover this like crazy delicious substance.
Oh, I have a feeling this isn't going to end well.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
But yeah, they find this flavor earth and they just become completely obsessed with it.
Oh no.
Their craving for this flavor earth, it gets so intense that they like undergo this like physical and social degeneration.
Oh wow.
Yeah, their bodies, they lose their like luminous forms and their world just becomes harsher. Yeah, it's really striking.
So their attachment literally changed them.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an illustration of how attachment can change us and also change the world around us.
Right.
Yeah, domino effect, right.
So how does it connect this like ancient story to our modern day experience?
Okay, well, the chapter, it draws a parallel between this flavor earth and the concept of addiction. I think it's brilliant.
It makes sense, right? Because addiction is all about craving.
Exactly.
How that shapes like your whole reality.
Yeah, and addiction, it's like craving in Buddhism in a way.
Right.
Right. Like it can totally take over your sense of self.
Right. Your whole world revolves around feeding that addiction.
Yeah, just like those beings, you know?
Right.
Fixated on the flavor earth.
So are you saying that like overcoming addiction could be seen as a kind of shift in bhava?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's what's so cool about this idea, because we start to understand that bhava is not just this like abstract force.
Right, yeah.
You know, it's our self-identity. It's constantly being molded by our past actions and like our present desires.
So it's like that combination of like the past and the present creates like the world that we experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the more we can understand how our desires are shaping our bhava, you know, the more we can start to understand the roots of our own suffering.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Okay. So these are some pretty interesting examples of how bhava works, you know, in these stories.
Right.
But I'm curious, like, how does this actually relate to us in our everyday lives? Like now?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's one that we're going to delve deeper into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore like how to actually identify.
I'm ready.
Sounds good.
Those flavor earths that might be shaping our own, you know, becoming.
All right, I'm hooked. So we've looked at how bhava works in these like old Buddhist stories. But I'm like, I'm really curious, right? Like, how does this apply to us today? Like right now, you know, like how can we recognize those flavor earths, you know, those cravings and desires that might be shaping our own becoming? That's where things get like super practical. And while the book, it doesn't like lay out a step-by-step guide, it does give us some really good insights into how we can like, you know, shift our hava towards something, you know, more free, more liberating.
Okay. No easy answers then.
All right.
All right. But I'm definitely here for the insight.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So one of the key takeaways that bhava, you know, it's always in flux.
Right. It's constantly changing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's shaped by this like really intricate interplay between like our past actions and our present choices. This is where like the concept of karma comes in.
Okay, yeah.
Karma.
Yeah, and I think karma is often like oversimplified, right?
Yeah.
People just think it means like actions. But it's so much more nuanced than that, right?
Yeah, way more nuanced. Yeah. It's not just about the actions, it's about the intentions behind the actions and like, you know, the consequences that ripple out from those actions.
Yeah.
And, you know, the chapter points out these two types of karma that are super relevant, I think, to understanding bhava.
All right, lay it on me. What are the two types?
Old karma and new karma.
Okay, so old karma, that's like the residue, like the leftovers from our past actions. You know, things we've done.
Yeah.
And new karma is what we're creating right now.
Right now in this moment.
Through our choices, okay.
With our thoughts, words, and deeds.
Yeah.
It's like we're carrying around this baggage from the past.
Yeah.
But we also have the power to like pack new bags, so to speak, you know?
Well, that's a great analogy. I love that.
Right.
And it reminds me of that story, you know, with the beings in the Brahma realm.
Right.
They were reborn there because of like their past good deeds. Their old karma.
Exactly. Yeah. Good karma.
But then that first being, his bhava shifted so dramatically when he forgot his past and started believing he was a creator god.
Yes. You're connecting the dots like perfectly. That shift, you know, was influenced by his new karma.
His actions, his clinging in the present moment. Wow.
Exactly. His clinging, his views. Yeah.
Yeah. So it shows how, like, even though our past actions have an effect, it's really our choices right now in the present moment that shape our experience.
I completely agree. It's mind-blowing, really.
Yeah, it is. So this is all starting to click for me.
Good.
If we're always creating new karma, Does that mean that we are constantly like reshaping our bhava?
Yeah, that's the implication.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty profound.
It's a big deal. And the text suggests that like even subtle shifts in like our craving and our clinging can have like this ripple effect on our bhava and how we see the world.
So even seemingly like small changes in our desires can lead to huge changes in our reality.
That's right. Think about like the Flavor Earth story.
Okay, right.
It was that like intensification of their craving.
Right, the fixation on the substance.
Right, that fixation that really started to like, you know, change things, transform their bhava and their world.
And this isn't just like an ancient parable.
No, not at all. This is playing out in our lives all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Think about how like getting fixated on a particular desire, it could be for anything. You know, a material possession, or a relationship, even like a specific outcome.
Yeah.
How that can color your entire perception. Like you're putting on like these bhava tinted glasses.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Bhava tinted glasses.
That just distort how you see everything.
It makes sense. So we are literally shaping our reality with our desires.
We are. It's wild.
Okay. So we've identified the problem.
Yeah.
We're all walking around with these like bhava-tinted glasses,
right,
creating our own suffering.
Right.
But like, how do we break free?
Right. Great question.
If even small changes in like craving can have such a huge impact, where do we even begin to make those changes?
Well, like I said, the text doesn't give us like, you know, a quick fix.
Okay.
But it does point us towards a path of like mindful awareness and intentional action.
So the first step is like paying attention to those cravings.
Yeah.
And really understanding how they're like influencing our bhava.
Right, absolutely.
But how do we actually like cultivate that kind of awareness? Those flavor earths, whatever they are for us personally, can be so tempting.
They are. They're so tempting.
Yeah.
And that's where those like Buddhist practices we talked about, they come in, right?
Okay, the practices, meditation, mindfulness.
Yes, exactly. They give us like the tools, right? To train our minds to like observe those cravings without judgment.
So it's not about suppressing the cravings or denying them.
No.
But like really just seeing them clearly.
Yeah. And then like, you know, gently, slowly.
Yeah.
Loosening their grip on us.
Okay. It makes sense because when we understand those cravings are like impermanent, they're changing all the time.
Right.
They can't really give us lasting happiness.
Right.
They start to lose their power over us.
Exactly. It's like, you know, taking off those bhava-tinted glasses and seeing the world and seeing yourself with fresh eyes.
Okay, this is all starting to like really come together.
Good.
But it's also raising some like pretty big questions for me.
Okay.
If our bhava is constantly changing, is there even such a thing as a true self?
Right.
And like, if there is, how does that fit into this whole idea of becoming?
Those are great questions, and that is exactly where we're going to pick up in the final part of our deep dive. We're going to explore those like deeper questions about the nature of self.
Right. I'm excited.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal of liberation in the context of bhava. It's going to be good.
All right. So we're back and we're diving into like the final part of our deep dive on bhava. We've talked about a lot, right? Like ancient stories, modern day addiction struggles, all this stuff. But I'm really, really curious about this whole question of the self.
Right.
So if our bhava, this idea of our sense of self is like constantly changing, is there even like a stable, unchanging me under all of that? Like, is there a true self?
That is the big question, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, philosophers and spiritual seekers, they've been wrestling with this for centuries.
Yeah.
And, you know, the book doesn't really give us like a clear-cut answer about this whole true self thing.
Okay.
But it does give us some like hints, I think, to help us understand this whole like complex issue.
Okay, so what are the hints? I'm all ears.
All right, so one of the key points, I think, is that, you know, our bhava is constantly changing, shaped by all that stuff, past actions, present desires. But it's not, like, totally random.
Okay, so it's not chaotic.
No, not chaotic. There's, like, a trajectory to it, you know? A path that's, like, influenced by the choices we make.
So it's not like we're just, like, floating around randomly in this, like, sea of becoming.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
there's a direction, there's a course we're charting.
Even if we're not consciously aware of it, maybe?
Maybe, yeah, sometimes. And this is actually where I think, like, the idea of liberation comes in, right?
Okay, liberation, yeah.
So in Buddhism, the goal isn't to, like, cling to this fixed, never-changing sense of self.
Right, okay.
It's about freeing ourselves from this, like, cycle of becoming that just, leads to more and more suffering.
So instead of, like, obsessing over, like, who we really are.
Right, exactly.
The focus is on transforming the process of becoming itself.
You got it. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And that transformation, according to the text, it really depends on recognizing, like, how impermanent our cravings and attachments really are.
Okay.
They're like the fuel, right?
Yeah.
For this whole bhava cycle.
They keep it spinning.
Keep it spinning, yeah.
Which brings us back to, like, those practices, right? Mindfulness, the meditation.
Right. Mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
They help us become more aware of all those cravings, to see them clearly without judging them.
Right.
And then slowly, start to loosen their hold on us.
Right. Because when we understand that, like, those cravings are just temporary. Yeah. They're always changing. Right. They can't really bring us, like, true happiness.
Exactly.
They start to lose their power over us. Makes sense.
They do. It's like, we talked about those glasses before.
Yeah, the pava glasses.
The pava tinted glasses.
It's like we're taking those off.
Yeah.
And we can see ourselves and the world more clearly.
More clearly. With fresh eyes, yeah.
Okay. So we're gaining, like, more awareness of how these desires are shaping our pava.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we're also gaining more freedom to choose, like, how we want to become.
You got it. It's like you're not just a passenger.
Right. We're not just being tossed around.
Tossed around by the waves of craving. Yeah.
Yeah.
You become an active participant.
Okay.
You can influence the direction of your journey.
Interesting. And this is where, like, the paradox comes in.
The paradox.
Yeah. That's the paradox.
So the paradox is this. By letting go of this idea of a fixed, like, unchanging self, we actually gain more freedom, more agency.
That does sound kind of paradoxical.
It is, yeah.
But I think I'm starting to get it.
Okay, good.
It's like by surrendering to this flow of becoming.
Yeah.
To the fact that reality is always changing.
Yes.
We actually gain, like, more control over the direction of our lives.
You're exactly right. And as we, like, learn to navigate this flow with more, like, awareness, more skill, our pava naturally starts to shift towards more peace, more wisdom, more compassion.
Which, sounds a lot like what liberation is all about.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not about clinging to some fixed identity.
Right.
It's about, like, embracing how fluid life really is, with an open heart, with clarity.
Well, I got to say, this has been, like, an incredibly eye-opening deep dive into bhava.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm, like, looking at the nature of self and, like, this whole path to liberation in a completely new way.
I'm glad to hear that. It's been really great exploring all this with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And remember, this is, like, just the beginning, right? This concept of bhava. It's got so many layers.
Oh, yeah.
It's a journey, really, an ongoing journey of discovery.
So for everyone listening, keep exploring, keep questioning.
Yes.
And keep diving deeper into, all these mysteries of becoming.
It's worth it.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to find. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.